All right, good morning, folks. We are back building the Catalina Wherry. So our bottom is on. It's been sitting all weekend long, so it's good and dry, and I'm going to be cleaning up the edges today. One of the mandates for this project is to look for areas that I can improve on speed, and to that end, we're also being self-critical and using hindsight to our advantage to think about what did I do on this project that I could do differently that would benefit another project. So two things come to mind right away, and one of them is the fact that I did not bend this cut water onto the stem before I was planking, or even before the stem was on the boat. That would have been the smart thing to do. As soon as I finished making the stem, I should have used the stem itself as a mold to bend the cut water in. I don't know why I didn't do that. I've done that in the past many times. This time around, I didn't think about it. Now we're taking a few steps back. When I was still lofting, rather than making a mylar template of the bottom of the boat, and I don't think I even did I? I think I just used a tick stick to lay out the bottom of the boat. This stick carries all the information I need for my keel, except for my station spacing. I should have made a door skin template of the bottom of the boat, like a full lateral half template. That would have sped up cutting out the plywood bottom initially, even just rough cutting it. I would have sped up just like shaping the actual bottom even after rough cutting it. It would have sped up making this false bottom as well, because I could have just taken that template, I could have laid it right on the stock that I had, I could have very quickly determined where my termination points were on the stock in terms of how to get around the sapwood and things like that. And I could have done all kinds of sort of calculations much faster had I just taken a little bit of time to make a door skin template way back then. Especially in a case like this where I knew at the onset I was going to make the bottom and then I was going to make this false bottom. I should have thought about that then. I didn't. The other thing I neglected to do was a wet out on my laps. So I did all kinds of sanding operations and flooding out the scarf joints with some fairing filler. I used the low viscosity Fixo epoxy to flood out these joints, and then followed it up with just an acid brush to fill it all in. And I really should have done that first, because now that's left me with another little sanding job to just try and clean up where those joints landed. Anyhow, we are moving on to the last couple of details before we can flip this boat, and one of them is I'm going to pull out all these fasteners here. We're going to fill the fastener holes, and I think I'll just use G-Flex epoxy and a syringe probably to do that. And we're going to bevel off the edge of this false bottom and put a nice little curve onto it and clean up the joint here between the two pieces. Use our little transfer gauge just to project our line here. I mean, I'm not trying to work to this line exactly, I'm going by feel, but it's peace of mind. Just a little visual reference. Okay, now in the interest of getting faster, let's see about just using a slick here to knock a bit of the meat off. I don't want to take it too far with the slick. Don't have a ton of room for errors on this, so I'll go back to Old Faithful from here on out. got the edge all dressed off, softened the corner just a hair, and now I'm just scrubbing off this little area here where the two pieces join because they're not quite flush. I'll just go over it like that. Probably sort of take this edge down just a hair, give it a slight crown to the bottom. Just the bare minimum in order to get rid of this little line here. One of the tricks for trying to see a shear line is to try and turn yourself upside down to get a good feel for what the boat looks like right side up. What I'm worried about is the shear looking too flat up forward. Maybe not having enough bounce to it. I think it looks okay. I took the clamps off along those sort of forward molds there. I had it all clamped up, and I decided I should pull those off and just try springing that up a little bit. Now my gunnels are going to be tapered, and so I need to make sure that I allow a little bit for that, so that up forward, if I put my spring that batten too high, too far up the stem towards the stem head, which is upside down right now, I could end up with that plank looking like it's flaring once I have a tapered batten on there. So I'm trying to kind of push it down a little bit, but still keep the shape, and also look at the shape of the plank line below it. That is the shape of the whole shear plank, and trying to come up with something that looks attractive. I think it looks okay. Like, so right now that batten on there is fully parallel sided. So imagine it's wider midships. It's going to be 1.5 inches wide midships, and probably about the same width up here at the stem. So I think that slight taper should follow that shear plank shape pretty good. So I'm going to mark that there. Got this plank right here, but it's actually got quite a bit of sweep to it. And I think it's going to be fine. I'm just kind of curious whether or not... I don't want to have to straighten it to make these rub rails. So and then I've got all this checking up forward here, which is problematic. So that's going to have to come out somehow. So I'm just trying to decide what's the best way to cut it, and just see if this thing has already got the right shape for the boat. Really not quite sure what to do. Maybe I should just try taking a batten on here and springing it down here and taking out this ratty bit, and then calling that good, and then ripping a couple widths off of that. Just a slight spike knot there. Mostly it looks pretty good. And it sweeps up real hard at the ass end here, and I don't know if that's going to be the bow end or the stern end, or I really don't even know if I should be using this one at all for the rub rails. Maybe I should be using a different one. Anyway, that's what I got. So I got this and a straighter one, so I don't know. I can't decide. I should probably just rip these two parallel, leave the shape in them, put them on the side of the boat, see how they jive with the lines that we have right now. So I decided I was just going to cut my rub rails out of this stock following the sweep of the stock. I put a batten on here, clamped it just outside of my this split here, and then I just sprung it into place, trying to follow the sweep all the way through, right down here to the tail end, and then I teased out, there's a bit of a hard hook in here, so I teased that out some. Midships, I moved the batten up to make for 1.5 inches up here in the midships, but down at the ends I just left the batten secured at the ends without moving it at all. So it's going to be like whatever that batten was, 1.25 inches or something like that, and then up to 1.5 inches in the middle. So that's going to make a nice taper. Always looks better with a taper in your gunnels or rub rails, whatever you want to call them. So I think I'm going to cut it freehand on the table saw, as I so often do. Of course, it's a little sketchier being a solid piece of oak, but it's just 1 inch thick, not 2 inches or anything. So we want our blade to be just about a tooth depth above the surface. So this became a massive banana. Be squirrely too at one end. Look at that. That was a little. I kind of figured it would spring a little bit, but not that much. That's quite a bit. So the question is, do I abandon that piece and just try and get both rub rails out of this piece? No, got sapwood in there. It's not going to fly. Well, maybe we'll just try springing this one into place on here. See what happens. Ultimately, it's going to hit the same lines on the boat. So I think it'll be okay. This feels like it's supple enough that I can coax it to the same shape. Were it not for the sapwood here, I would try and squeeze 2 new ones out of this piece, but the sapwood's the deal killer. And I got them on cold. They're not really rolling into place. And they're definitely gamey as hell. The one of them's got a huge sweep, and this one's like just crooked like a dog leg. So what I'm going to do before I take this off the boat right now, I'm going to glue some blocks to the little bit of overhanging planking here to locate them, because the position is good. So I'm going to do that much at least. I've got a sur marked out. I need to tweak the end here to match the stem profile, because this stem has a little bit of a, takes a jog outward a little tiny bit. So we need to accommodate that. In fact, I think I'm just going to worry about, I think the steam will probably allow this to roll in properly. So what I'm going to do is just focus on thinning this out a little bit so there's just a little less meat to take off or to fight with. And we'll just get that little bevel cut into the very end. And of course, I need to figure out what my final shape is going to be, which I haven't done yet. I think I just want to wait till it's finished in place, and then we'll worry about whatever angle I cut off the ends at. All right, and then we want to do a round over on this corner to Probably about a 1/2 inch radius, I think. 1/4 inch is too small. I think 3/4, I like 3/4, but I think my customer, he wants a bit of a ledge there. So we'll just go with 1/2 inch. I think that'll be reasonable. Good compromise. We'll worry about the top edge later on. Okay, that's my plan. Blocking, little blocks to slap on the bottom. So I'll just chop a few bits like this, glue them on with cyanoacrylate. I might even pop a couple plastic nails through there, just so that we can, when we steam this in place, I just got something positive I can just butt it up against. Especially when I'm gluing, that's when it gets really messy. What I'm doing is I'm backing out the rubrail. I'm using a paint scraper with a blade ground to a convex shape, and it's creating a slight cove in the back of the rubrail into which adhesive or bedding compound can sit, and it also allows the edges of the rubrail to sit nice and tight to the planking. It only takes a few extra moments to do this, but it's a really worthwhile technique. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it can yield some noticeably improved results. Okay, I've got those rubrails in a steam box right now. So for now, I'm going to fill some holes in the bottom of the boat. And as usual, I have a little trick for you. So you got a syringe, right? And you want to get epoxy into it. Well, as soon as you try and fill it and start pushing this guy in, you end up with like all this air in here that won't allow you to drop the plunger down. So you take a piece of string, any old piece of string, load her up. There we go. Now here's the trick, eh? So that piece of string is going to allow a little bit of air to escape as you push the plunger in. And maybe you could hear that. And then once it's in, we just suck that out of there. And she's good to go. Let's go fill some holes. I gave this just a tiny little spoonful of colloidal silica. It's just the regular West System fast hardener. I know this is oak. I should be using G-Flex, but you know what? I'm not really bonding anything here. It's just filling these holes, making sure no water gets in there, so it really doesn't matter. It's going to bond to the oak just fine for this purpose. Whenever I mention that there's an incompatibility between oak and epoxy, people ask, why can't you glue oak with epoxy? The very simple answer is that oak is very dense and it's very unstable, and epoxy just doesn't like it. But for a more detailed answer, I've linked to an article from West Systems Epoxy Works magazine down in the description. So I put these in the steam box yesterday, but my steam box was running on only one long. Couldn't get my 220 burner up and going. It was burned out. Couldn't change out the element, too rusted up, so I had to try and cook these with just my 110 element, and the size of the box, the temperature of the day, it could not really get it up to a good head of steam. Best I could do is I could get them sort of warmed up. But that was enough. That was enough to sort of take the fight out of them and allowed me to do the thing I wanted to do, which is rotate them into position. And so we're good. What I want to do right now is just tune up this last little fit down here and then buzz off the end at the right angle. And then we're going to put them on with Sikaflex if the stuff in my tube is still alive. I'm just using my block plane, just do a little bit of shaving in here and try and get it to fit a bit better. What I like to do is try and have something to bear that against. The trickiest part is that the amount of wind it needs to take down here at the bottom is such that I can't even check it without using a clamp, which is frustrating. We want the ends of our rubrails to protrude onto the cutwater for looks, but the angle of the cutwater changes from that of the planking, and so we have to bevel off the ends of our rubrails a little bit in order to match that. Once the rubrails have a nice clean fit against the cutwater, we now need to trim off the ends. And so we want to match the rake of the cutwater or the rake of the stem. And then of course we don't want that cut to be square across the rubrail. We want to angle it back a little bit for looks and then round off the ends of those rubrails so it's a nice clean finish. Sort of a nice sculptural organic look. This is just a small detail, but we don't want the rubrails to run right to the face of that cutwater. We want to have them hold back maybe 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. It just looks a lot better that way. This angle's just a guess, but we'll record it to match on the other side. Okay, that looks good. I want to round that over now. I treat the rounding over of any part in a boat exactly the same way I round over a spar or an oar. That is, you take the part that is either rectangular or square in cross section, and you knock the major corners off so that it is now 8-sided instead of 4-sided, and then you knock off the adjacent corners so that now it's 16-sided instead of 8-sided, and so on. Of course, in a small part like this, we don't need to go very far beyond knocking the initial corners off, and then we're on to using abrasives to round it over. This methodology also works regardless of whether or not you're dealing with something that has 90-degree corners or whether it's something more like a parallelogram. The same principles apply and work equally well. The trick here is to soften this round over here so it's sympathetic to the rest of the shape without rounding this corner off. I want to leave this crisp and straight. Okay, here we go, that's done. And when we glue it, we'll drill and countersink for a screw right in here, but I think I'll do that after it's all clamped in place rather than to try and do it right now. So that looks really good. I'm just going to mark where the base of that is for future reference. Okay, excellent. Okay, I've done my best to try and fit this rubber rail down here towards the transom ear, and unfortunately I just didn't get this angle right initially. I don't know why exactly, but I can't get it in there, and I don't have planking extending below here enough to tweak that angle in, so I'm stuck. I beveled off the bottom of the rub rail to match this angle as best as I can, but we're just going to have to fill it in with a little wooden wedge. That's the best we can do. I'd rather put a wooden wedge in there than put a pile of just epoxy or any other kind of goo in there, so that'll get glued in and fill in the blank. It's too bad it worked out that way, but ultimately this is all getting painted anyway, so it's not a big deal. And this is all going to get trimmed away, everything that sticks out here. So it'll just all flow together when we're done. All right, we got some Satan in a tube here, so we're going to smear this on, just like we did at the bottom. And do our best to get it all clamped into place. There is absolutely nothing this crap doesn't get all over when you're working with it. Okay. Clean up. There's a lot of people that wouldn't bother with this skim out, but you know, it's good practice. You skim it out, you absolutely guarantee you're going to get 100% adhesion. No dry spots. All right, let's get this on here. Okay, now note I put one of my batten jacks onto the hull back here, just to help carry one end. This stuff is so dense that it just does not like to slide. So once you got this sort of tacked in place, it pretty much wants to stay there. So I really want to make sure I get my sur mark lined up right at the beginning. And these stop blocks are absolutely vital here. If I didn't have these on, I would not be getting this anywhere close to the right location. Sikaflex just obliterates everything in its path. Okay, now just a question of going over the whole thing with other clamps and just putting the squeeze on. I'll take my tapping block and tap that all down to make sure it's a good solid match. Get the squeeze out going. I know my clamps are getting in the way because this batten in behind here is not allowing me to clamp it in the best location, so my clamps are poking up high, which is interfering with my cleanup. I might just leave the tape in place and just come along later and take a knife and score along the edge of the rub rail and peel the tape off with all the glue stuck to it. That might be a messy job, I don't know. That's it for this week, folks. Got her done.